And today we're going to talk about chapters 1 to 6 in Freak the Mighty by Rodman Philbrick. So I hope that you really enjoy this book because this book is a very good book. It's won the Young Reader level and then lots of other awards, and it's just a really good book. Yeah, so again, hope that you really enjoy this amazing book, okay? Okay, So number 1, chapter 1 is the unvanquished truth. So the first sentence in this book is this: I never had a brain until Freak came along and let me borrow his for a while, and that's the truth, the whole truth. So do you think that the character Maxwell, but we're just gonna call him Max, do you think that he really didn't have a brain? No, he of course had a brain, right? It's just that he thought he wasn't using it. And why do you think that Maxwell thought this of himself? If you're you and somebody says you're dumb, then you're like, no, I'm not. But Maxwell actually is saying he's not saying that he's dumb. He's just saying he doesn't have a brain, which is sort of like saying you're dumb, right? So why do you think that Maxwell, I'm just calling him Max. Why do you think that Max, why do you think that Max says this? And then I also wanted to ask you, do you think that communicating with your hands, fists, and your legs, I can show you my feet right now, but anyway, so do you think that that's a good way of communication, or do you think that talking like how I'm talking right now, which form of communication do you like more, and which form do you think will work better if you were trying to, let's say, convince someone, and you can't, and like if you kick people and sort of like that, you're convincing, all right, but you know what I mean, right? It's not like really convincing, it's sort of like forcing, right? So I want you to convince, but if you can convince out of your fists and feet, then you can always tell me in my YouTube channel. Okay, now I wanted to ask you about Graham and Grimm. What do you think about Graham and Grimm? Do you think that they are bad people because maybe they think they're a little suspicious of Freak? Freak or Max. Either one works. Or do you think that they are good people because they took in Max in the first place? Okay, now I wanted to ask you about Little Freak, okay? Or Kevin, but I'm just gonna call him Freak because while I was reading this, I just got used to him calling Freak, used to calling Kevin Freak. So I wanted to ask you, how would you describe this Little Freak? Even as a little kid, do you think that he was pretty smart? And also, I wanted to ask you, ask you about something else, and it's this. Grimm always says, that Maxwell is going to be sort of like his father, which we now know, we sort of have a hint that this father did something bad. What do you think that this father did bad? This could be anything. I think that maybe he robbed something, maybe he vandalized and robbed, things like that, maybe. And also, I wanted to ask you if people, even your own grandparents, were saying we have to watch out because our grandkid might become the next Maxwell's father. Okay, I mean, when I know the name of Max's father, then I'll tell you. But for right now, that would be pretty bad. Okay, so now we're going to chapter 2, which is called Up from the Down Under. So I wanted to ask you about, so I wanted to ask you about Max's room. How would you describe this room? And would you like a room downstairs in the basement? Or would you like a room, normal rooms that are not in the basement? And also, I wanted to ask you, do you think that, I also wanted to ask you, Up from the Down Under, that day was like he was in the yard and he saw Freak, right? And you look at and Freak. How would you describe how he was acting? And if you had been the movers, what would you have wanted to do with Freak? And please be honest. Personally, I would have wanted to throw Freak. But of course, we know that Freak's going to be a good character, so I'm not going to say that. But, well, I just did. But, you get the point, right? But anyway, I also wanted to ask you about this. So the last sentence from this chapter is this. He wants me to die. Do you really think that Freak or, Kevin, do you think that he really wants Maxwell to die? And if you had been Maxwell, how would you have responded to identify yourself, Earthling, which is what Freak says? How would you have responded to this? I don't know how I would have responded to this, but probably I'd be like, okay, so my name is Jaden, and who are you? I'll be like that, okay? But then again, everybody's different. But I would be like a little shocked. I'd be like, okay. Like that kind of speaking, I would be sort of like that. Okay, so chapter 3 is called American Flyer. So, what do you think about Earthling? So, do you think that it would be more that it's silly because people don't call themselves Earthling, even though they're more of an Earthling than a person? Well, okay, that doesn't really make any sense, but still, Earthling fits more. Do you think that if you had been the person who made up the word, would it be person and human? Or would you do Earthling? I don't know. It's just that I'm so used to human, but I'm pretty sure if I was the first one to ever make it, I would probably do Earthling. That sounds pretty cool in my opinion. Okay, but anyway, I wanted to ask you about how Freak had this American Flyer. I mean, not American Flyer, but like this thing in the tree, and he was trying to get it, right? And anyway, so Maxwell helps. Do you think that what part of the story do you think was the starting point of the relationship? Probably here, right? And I wanted to ask you, what do you think made Maxwell do this? Just out of kindness? Or do you think that there was some other reason behind Maxwell's actions? Maybe because he wanted to make a friend. And I also wanted to ask you about Freaks and how he talks. Are you impressed by Freak and you're like, whoa, he's so smart, I want to be friends with him? Or are you like jealous of Freak and you're like, oh, he's so good, I wish I could be that good? Or Or would you rather be like, not jealous, but angry at him, and you'll be like, oh, why is Freak the only one who knows everything? I don't know anything. In those three, and I'm pretty sure if you think of anything else, what would you choose? And also, I wanted to ask you, if you were a person, okay, and you only had to learn one word in these two words. The word number one is mechanical bird, and the other one is ornithopter. I'm not very sure if I'm saying it right, but in those two words, which bird would you like? Not which bird. Whoa, which word would you like to know? And well, actually, mechanical bird is actually two words, but still, so word or two, I would like ornithopter because that sounds cooler. Okay, but anyway, so I wanted to ask you, so we are going to the basement, which is Max's room, right? And then we go to chapter 4, which is called What Frightened the Fair Gwen. So, I wanted to ask you about this. So, Grim, right? Grandfather is called Grim. First of all, I wanted to ask you, when you started reading this book, were you surprised that the grandfather was called Grim? And did you actually suspect, even without Freak's, what Freak said in chapter 4, did you still think that Grim was pretty grim? And also, I wanted to ask you about knights, okay, and quests, and King Arthur. And do you think that this is all interesting, or do you think that is all boring history? And this can have two sides. I love history, so I think that this is very interesting. And so sorry, I was reading a book about, and there was a character named Frank, so sorry if I mess up. So now Freak is like, so I'm gonna read some sentences that Freak said in the book, okay? The knights were like the first human version of robots. They wore this metal armor to protect them and make them invincible. When I get my stuff unpacked, I'll show you the pictures. It's pretty amazing, really, that hundreds of years before they had computers, they were already attempting to exceed the design limitations of the human body. And so I wanted to ask you, do you think that being a knight counts as being a robot? Because some people will be like, armor is armor. Robots are a completely different thing, okay? And do you think that armor makes them completely invincible or not? And for people who think that, of course, knights will not be invincible with just armor, then make up 3 scenarios where the knight would be powerless against whatever he was fighting, even when he was in armor. And no offense to Freak, I was just saying. I was just curious. Okay, but anyway, so now Maxwell says, I thought there weren't any real robots, just in the movies. And then Freak was like, what? And did you really know that there were real robots these days? Or were you also surprised that there were already robots? I actually already know that. And I wanted to ask you, television versus books. Which do you like better? And do you really have an opinion on which makes helps your brain more, something like that, okay? And this could also be a very, very good debate. I like debates because they make you think, and you don't have to be angry with the opponent. You just try to be level. It's just really amazing doing a debate. Like your brain grows and grows. Even not like really, because then your head would explode, but you know, just inside your brain it will grow. And so Freak says that books are like a truth serum, right? What is another thing that books are? Like truth serum is one. What's another one? Okay, maybe I would call it books are a stress reliever, because whenever I have stress, I read, stress flies away. That might not be for everybody, but that's just for me. Okay. And then the Fair Gwen is like grabs a Freak so like the Fair Gwen comes, right? And she grabs a Freak and she's like, "What are you doing to my little child?" Right? And if you had been Maxwell, how would you have felt? How would you have felt? And how would you have reacted to this? And to describe the feeling, I want you to do a metaphor and a simile and then 3 adjectives. Yeah, I lay it on really hard because I want to really train your mind, and really, just really train your mind. Okay, spitting image is chapter 5, right? So Maxwell goes in somewhere in his head. It's like it's cool and dim, and like you are a cloud and you change shapes. What do you think of this place? How would you describe this place? Would you like to be in this place, or do you think that it's too dull and boring and you want to actually be doing something? Everyone has their own opinion on this. And also, I wanted to ask you, do you think that this place in your head, do you think that this is a stress reliever in a way? And can you think of one way something that you do to relieve stress? Yeah, like I said before, number 1 is just reading books. Okay, but now I wanted to ask you about this, the Fair Gwen, right? And then so the Fair Gwen says sorry, and she's inviting Maxwell to supper, right? And I wanted to ask you, if you had been Maxwell, how would you have felt? And of course people would say happy, right? Once you've done about 3 of my classes, you'll know that when I just ask you this, one metaphor, 1 simile, 3 adjectives. Try to memorize that. That'll always be it. But I might always change the standards a little. But anyway, and then I wanted to ask you, if you had been Maxwell, would you have been excited to go to the supper or not? Because Maxwell just says, "Do I have to?" at first, right? And then the Fair Gwen, okay? So how do you think about the Fair Gwen's attitude after this? After she learns that Maxwell is a good guy. And I wanted to ask you, since the Fair Gwen was so affected by Maxwell and how he looked like a spitting image of his father, do you think that his father did something worse than just rob? Right? So we're gonna have to find that out. And I wanted to ask you, Freak is Kevin. And I'm talking about Max. Max is crying. And the strange thing is, he's happy. Have you ever cried, but at the same time you're very, very happy? I haven't, but then again, my life compared to a lot of others is pretty short. So I still have lots of years in my life. So there might be a time when this happens. Okay, chapter 6 is called The Close Encounter of the Third Kind. Do you know, so 4th of July, right? So so I'm gonna read the first paragraph of chapter 6 is this. 4th of July, right? Everybody goes nuts. the dads are drunk and having cookouts, and the moms are trying to keep all the brats from blowing their precious little pinkies off with cherry bombs, and the kids are running wild through the backyards. It's like no rules apply, and that makes everything real edgy, if you know what I mean. Like, let's have a blast and who cares what happens. I wanted to ask you, when you read this, what kind of impression did you have about Max's neighborhood? It's not the best neighborhood you will want to live in, right? It's a little, let's say, a little dangerous, you know, a dangerous neighborhood. But do you think that this will affect Freak and Max in any way during the story? Or do you think that will have nothing to do with it and there will be more important things than dangerous neighborhoods in this book? And let me just tell you, if you don't want any spoilers, skip like 5 seconds, okay? Okay, just skip 5 seconds right now. Okay, there's a lot of more serious things than neighborhoods like this in the book. That was way more than 5 seconds, guys, but sorry about that. Anyway, excuse me. I wanted to ask you, you know, so, Freak and, Freak and Max are there, right? And there's Tony D. How would you describe Tony D here? And, I also wanted to ask you about, I wanted to also ask you, do you think that, you know what Freak was saying, right? And Freak was saying like cretin, C-R-E-T, excuse me. Okay, so, cretin, which is C-R-E-T-I-N, which is defined as one who suffers from mental deficiency. Well, if you had been Freak and you knew that the person who was under you couldn't really beat up the guys, would you have said that? And Freak was like, oh my god, right? Because like they might have gotten beaten up, and Freak was all counting on the fact that maybe Maxwell could fight off the guys, right? Excuse me. And I wanted to ask you, do you think that this makes it more funny, or do you think makes it more serious? I think that it sort of, makes it a little funny at the same time a little serious, but mostly funny, and it gives you in a good, easy mood. And now, like, Freak is saying genius things. He keeps on saying like copper, and then he's like also strontium nitrate. I don't know. Sorry about this, but I just don't know a lot. And then he's like also potassium nitrate, sulfur, aluminum. And I wanted to ask you, do you think that watching the fireworks while reciting this would be any fun? And how would you describe knowledge? Because to Freak or Kevin, knowledge is very important. It's sort of what Freak is about, right? If you think about Freak, at least for me, the first thing I think about is he's a genius, And so anyway, we finished for today, okay? And I wanted to ask you one last question. It was, do you think that this relationship between Freak and Maxwell, this relationship, how would you describe it? But anyway, like I said before, we're finished. Last questions, okay? So, in your opinion, what was your favorite part in these chapters? And how do you like this amazing book so far? Really fun to monitor how you like the book. I loved it, of course, and it's just really fun talking to you. And also, what was your favorite character in these chapters? And also, what was your least favorite character? Mine's Tony D. Okay, but anyway, And I'll always ask you these questions because, of course, the book might change your opinions. I once liked this character in a book, and then suddenly something began to happen, and after that, I hated the character. Okay, so we really need to monitor this. Okay, finally, I wanted to ask you, what other adventures do you think that Freak and Maxwell will have together? Dun dun dun! And we're gonna leave that one for our next session, guys, okay? So, Freak the Mighty, an amazing book by Rodman Philbrick. Rodman Philbrick also, I think, wrote the Mostly True Adventures of Homer P. Fig, something like that, okay? And it's just really, I really like that book, so I hope that you also check that amazing book out too, guys, okay? So, keep reading, guys. My motto, keep reading. Reading's really fun, and it opens your mind and gives you knowledge, and Freak has a lot of knowledge. He reads tons of books, remember? And so, keep on reading lots of books again. And I hope that you had a great, amazing time with me and the amazing book, Freak the Mighty. Okay? Bye, guys!